Welcome to the Monstrous Flesh podcast, where we explore the evolution and role of women and non-binary people in horror, as well as familiar tropes of the genre through a feminist lens. Hello, I'm Clelia, one of your podcast hosts.
And hi, I'm Meg, the other host of the podcast.
And in this series, we are turning our attention to witches and the portrayal of witchcraft in horror cinema around the world. And in each episode, we dissect one film, or two sometimes, we feel fits the bill particularly well. And today, we are broadcasting live from Helena Marcos Dance Academy in Berlin, where all is not quite what it seems. Our film is, of course, Suspiria, and we will be discussing both the 1977 original from Dario Argento, but also Luca Guadagnino's reimagining that was released in 2018. So, Meg, do you care to give us a little synopsis?
Suzy Banyon, an American ballet student, arrives in Germany on a dark and stormy night to attend a prestigious but mysterious ballet school. When she arrives, the school's in turmoil as one of their students has mysteriously disappeared. Suzy, at first entranced by the elegant surroundings, soon discovers that something more sinister lurks beneath this veneer of glamour, and as her fellow students begin to disappear one by one, she begins to consider that there may be something darker afoot.
Wow. I mean, I'm so impressed, and that was like totally ad-libbed. I love it. Amazing. I mean, we both love that film. There's no...
Yeah.
Who doesn't love that film? Honestly.
Don't like Suspiria.
Who doesn't like Suspiria? I'd like to know. But what I'd like to know is actually when did you first see this film? Because I remember vividly, like, it's like one of those films that I know exactly where and when, when it was.
I feel like I'm terrible when people ask me this because my long-term memory is...
I usually am.
Is like Swiss cheese. There's massive gaps. Where it's just
No, I am. No. I usually am as well. People are like, I love this film. They're like, when did you first see it? I'm like, I have no idea.
But I can't remember when I first watched it. But I did rewatch it. I think I rewatched it because when I did not the first, but my first encounter with Monstrous Flesh, because that were one of the films that we talked about on course, weren't it? So I think I watched it again then, but I think I had seen it before. But that sticks out more in my mind because I remember watching it then and just being so, it's just mesmerising. I think it's just such a I saw someone describe it as a phantasmagoric assault on the senses.
And I was like, that. Yes. That's exactly it. Yeah.
And it really is like a full-on, and in the spirit of being an absolute mega fan, I also own the Goblin soundtrack on vinyl.
oh my God. I was just thinking, rewatching it this time, I was like, I absolutely need to get the vinyl for this.
Yeah.
It's so, I mean, that soundtrack is just so epic, isn't it?
It's so good. And it's so, I mean, I know we're going to talk about the 2018 version in a bit, but I think one of the things that sets this apart is the way that the soundtrack and like the sound design of the film is so integrated. It's so integral to like your experience, and it's that's what makes it this like, you know, assault on the senses, because it's visually so it's got that real Argento like neon color, and then with Goblin soundtrack, it's it's just so good, so sinister and weird.
It is, yeah. It's no wonder that it's a really flagship for Giallo cinema in general as well. But I mean, it'll be really interesting because I know we probably have some dissimilar views of the 2018 reimagining, which will make for a really interesting conversation, I guess. But it's interesting that you say, that the contrast of the soundtrack and sound design in the original one, because I think it's in the 2018 version, although it's less obvious. I think it's the same thing actually.
Yeah, yeah. Well, my partner owns the 2018 Suspiria one on vinyl, so it's like Suspiria soundtracks, dueling banjos. Yeah,
and so of course it would. Yeah, Tom York and all that. But I remember, so I watched, and I'm so glad you mentioned about the course, because I'm like, any occasion I have to shoehorn this film in, I have to. So of course, in any course that I've done, it's like we've got to talk about Suspiria. But the first time I watched it, actually, it was my first year of uni, and I can't remember why, I had to stay late at the library, and it was back then when we still had most you had DVD decks basically in the library. God, it sounds so old. But it was a rainy night, so it was a stormy and rainy night, and I picked this film up because someone had mentioned it in I was doing a horror module, and someone I'd mentioned it in it, and I had no idea what it was, and so I watched it and he felt like this is the same experience, and it was so it stayed with me forever since. So just such such an incredible film, and it started my love affair with Argento. Love and hate affair, I suppose.
Love and hate, that's
right?
fair. He's not an easy man to love in many ways.
Exactly. Yeah. That's the least we can say. That's for certain.
But shall we dive in?
Absolutely. Well, and I was just going to mention, so before we dive in the film itself, but actually when we talked about it, you mentioned that you'd watched the 4K restoration of the film as well, and so did I, and it was just incredible how more. Talking about the vividness of of everything in that film, the restoration does such an incredible job at bringing that to the forward.
It's a BFI restoration that. Because I watched it on BFI Player. Mm-hmm. Other sources are available. They're not sponsoring us. Not yet.
Although,
if they want to.
We were open to.
But it came up and it said about how BFI had been involved in restoration. And I think rewatching it through that restoration really, like you say, highlights just the everything about it is so vivid. It's just such an entrancing experience, and I think so I've got it somewhere on like DVD, and I'm sure if I put that in and watch that next to this BFI one, because one of the things I like about older horror, and particularly like giallo sometimes, is that it's a bit blurry and it's a little bit like it looks a bit more gritty, but to see something restored and obviously done really carefully and with great respect to it really just brought it to life in an all different way that I thought were really and really noticeable. Sometimes you watch like a restoration or you see it on like Blu-ray,
what did they actually do? Yeah, but this one, absolutely. I've got some really cool little facts about the story behind the story, if you want to hear about that, before we get stuck in the actual plot or lack thereof. No, I'm kidding. Absolutely love it. Okay, so about, like I said, about the story behind the story. So I don't know if people know, I know that we've talked about it, but Suspiria is part of a trilogy by Dario Argento called the Three Mothers Trilogy, made up of Suspiria, Inferno, and Mother of Tears. That was released much later in 2007. But it was actually an essay by Thomas de Quincey called Levana and All Ladies of Sorrow, which itself is part of the collection Suspiria de Profundis, that provided Dario Argento with the spark of an idea, which was then further ignited by tales from his then wife and writing partner, Daria Nicolodi, who co-wrote Suspiria with him, who told him of her grandmother's stay at a music school, which was rumoured to be run by a coven of witches. Love that, right? And it's from these stories then that Argento came up with the mythology of the Three Mothers, which were to feature in those three films that I've just mentioned. So within this mythology, the Three Mothers were actually three sisters who in the 11th century turned to witchcraft in order to gain boundless power. And that theme is seen through, all through the three films. They became immortal, or as they claim, they became death itself. And in the 19th century, they commissioned an architect, Ivarelli, to build them three buildings in three cities across the globe. And so the three films then take place in the contemporary age in these very buildings, which is why, we start to understand why architecture is itself such a massive part of those films. Like I said, it's like really central to the production design. and where many films appear to use the supernatural and occult to create scares, then the Three Mother trilogy actually incorporates elements of Western esotericism. Sorry, I can never pronounce this right. Rather than traditional Christian images of evil. And I've got some like other facts that I will bring later when we talk about Suspiria. But as we know, the three mothers are Mother Suspiriorum, the mother of Sighs, which is the oldest of the three and lives in Freiburg, Germany. Motor Lacrimarum, mother of tears, and the most beautiful of the sisters. They're like the Gorgons, basically. Holds rule in Rome. And Mother Tenebrarum, the mother of darkness, the youngest and cruelest of the three, controls New York, which is clearly the place that you want to be if you're young and cruel.
Oh, absolutely.
So, she chose fashion.
Yeah. Oh my God, that is so cool, isn't it? Oh.
This was part of I was supposed to introduce a screening of Inferno at the cinema a few months ago, and it didn't go ahead. So I have all those facts that I was desperate to let someone know about. So this is perfect.
Oh, that is so cool, though, isn't it? That's so interesting. I think I love to hear about stuff like that. Like that background. It's so cool.
Exactly, and I just think it's just so interesting to put it in those terms as well, because you realize how much care and how much mythology has gone into creating this world. So there's a lot of stuff that can feel a bit random about these films, but actually it's because he's thrown everything in the kitchen sink at it.
Yeah.
But when you start pulling at threads, and I think this is what the 2018 version also does really quite well. Then you start seeing really interesting and rich tapestry.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's the thing. If you don't, and that's why introductions to films are so important, and podcasts like ours are so important.
Exactly. Yeah. Doing the Lord's work.
Our Dark Lord's work.
Absolutely, I would say who the Lord is. Then is for for
Black
each and
Phillip.
every one of us to decide. Black Phillip, exactly.
But yeah, that's so interesting. It's because I think that aspect of it, like the Mother of Tears, Mother of Sighs, is really drawn out more in 2018.
Yes.
It's not as explicit in the 1977 version, but you still get that idea of the power of the power of these witches and the longevity, how long they've been around, and this just the sinister nature of. I mean, I do think that again. And I'm jumping in front to 2018 a little bit, but that sinister nature of them is brought out much more.
100%.
Yeah, but I mean, they are very sinister. But in the 1977 version, it's almost pantomime a little bit. It's very over the top, isn't it? It's very which I love. I mean, I think that's brilliant.
Oh, I think it works really well for what it is. You're right. In the 2018 version, it's more concerned with. I mean, it's more embedded in, in the time and place that it takes place, and it's also, it's more about politics and history, right? So, yeah. But yeah, anyway, let's dig in. Let's start our full review of the 1977 version.
Yes. Well, one of the things I really loved that I'd maybe not noticed when I watched it before is when she's coming through airport, like Goblin's the incredible first piece from Goblin. It only plays when she's looking through doors.
Yes.
And so then it pans back and it stops, and then it's as though she's like going out into this dangerous unknown. It's this music starting. I thought that was such a good.
It's so unsettling, isn't it? Yeah, that the creepy little music box, and sort of music, and with the sound design, when she goes through those doors, and you can see the mechanism of the door going, like a blade going in, going through someone's skin. It's just, instantly that there's, danger. There's something not quite right about the place.
and straight away, I mean, obviously, rain. The rain is so
God.
It's so unwelcoming. Like she's just in this, oh God, and then she can't get a taxi, and we've all been there.
Like, what is that about? They're literally, they're like, we do not want your business. I mean, I've never seen someone struggle so much to call a taxi.
But that then positions it like. like this language barrier, like she don't know what he's saying and he don't know what she's saying, and straight away you find her so alienated in this unwelcoming country. She's just sort of, you know,
those few hours of Duolingo were absolutely news to her. I relate so much with this. This was my first experience of arriving in England and, you know, thinking, you know, doing your best. Should I, you know, because all she's saying is a street name and the guy is like, huh? clearly alienating her from there. I did really love the fact, and I don't know if I've necessarily picked up on it so much the first few times that I'd seen this film, but the opening is very, I mean, the film has been compared to a fairy tale a lot, and you know, rightly so. But actually, from that very opening and the voiceover, you know, saying Suzy Banyon decided to perfect her ballet studies in the most famous school of dance in Europe, and blah blah. It's like, you know, once upon a time sort of opening, and that's Well, and that were my note actually. When you see Taxi cutting through trees, it's like Little Red Riding Hood, like she's cutting through this forest, and then she sees, you know, this absolute, like, just baroque majesty of this school coming out of woods. And then, obviously, then there's Pat running, and she's just like, well, she goes to the door, doesn't she? And she's banging on the door. I mean, imagine, you've flown from America to Italy. I don't know how long that flight is, but I know it's a long time. And you get out, it's pissing down rain, taxi drivers are knobhead. And you're like, can you just take me here? And he's like, what? I don't know. And then you get there, and you're like, oh, wow, what an incredible building. But why is it in middle of woods? And then, you know, you're banging on intercom, let me in, like, go away. Go away, don't come back another time. I know, you just kind of think like, oh, I just don't think this is going to work. It's not going to be worth it.
And then, obviously, we see Pat run past her. And then she, you know, she's obviously very afraid. She's like running out in rain in just a raincoat and nothing else, and she's fleeing. And
he looks like she's talking to someone else, but I don't think at that stage we hear what she says.
No, she's just because it's lost in wind, which I think is such a good. So you're very much from Suzy's perspective, because she don't know what's happening, and neither do you. Like, you don't hear what she says, it gets pulled away, but then she's just running. And then we see her that she gets, I mean, the architecture, as you've already mentioned, but the architecture in this film is so stunning,
right? Yeah.
And we see, you know, she gets in this beautiful, like, Art Deco apartment building. We see Chekhov's stained glass roof.
Did you not think that? I was like, this building is my version of Barbie's dream house.
Oh, yes.
This is where I want to live.
Absolutely. But it's all so absurd and, like, fantastic from off. It's colour and noise, and, you know, it's so, everything's so beautiful.
And the salt and the sense, yeah.
And this building's so beautiful, but then we're sort of following Pat for a bit to find out what Pat's running from. You can hear these like disembodied groaning sort of voices, and it's so sinister because you can just about catch it, and it's just like
a little bit of cackling here and there.
And then for some reason she decides to go in the bathroom, and she's opening window, shutting window. We don't know why. Windows flying open.
Not sure what's up with her. Did notice that the dubbing, and that's very synonymous with Giallo in general, the dubbing is terrible, but it works so well somehow, and I think that's because they were all, I think when they were filming, so the actors were not necessarily all talking English, so they were talking in their original language, and then the dubbing would happen later. But it really works, doesn't it? It really works with that sense of uncanny. I think this is the only genre really where I can forgive terrible dubbing.
I think so. I agree. I think when you see it, like you said, because it is uncanny. It's like you're watching someone, and it just builds that sense of just what is happening. Like I don't fully. Everything seems just a little bit out of time. It takes you into that thing, and it's and then a very flamboyant murder scene again, which is very giallo. We see a beating heart being stabbed. A woman gets cut to ribbons on the Chekhov stained glass.
Yeah, which I the only thing I didn't understand about that scene is like the sense of like time and space. I was like, she was in the bathroom, and all of a sudden she seems to be on the roof. Or like,
what's happened?
Yeah, how did she get from that bathroom to that stained glass? It wasn't, anyway. Yeah. It's
I do think the fact that Pat's friends left some sort of lacy slip on the line in this absolute storm is very funny. But then she's like watching it, and then she just see like the eyes, then you're like, ooh!
Yes. The glowing eyes and then the really hairy arm that comes out and grabs
comes
her.
in through a window, this big hairy arm grabs hold of her and Pat's no more, and a friend is, the innocent bystander who is cut to ribbons.
Yeah.
And it is just, so we have this, very very brutal murder, and then we cut to a crowded locker room full of catty women, all poking at each other, all, you're shit, I'm shit.
They also mean, I've actually read, so I wasn't, because I was kind of like, oh, they're all so catty, they seem to be like really like, and making fun of each other in a way that just seems, really sort of out of place. But I actually read that Argento originally wrote the story as for, there were supposed to be children, basically. And and so it's kind of refused to change a lot of the dialogue, which is why they sound like they're 12-year-old, because they're meant to be, actually. So
that makes so much sense, because
it makes so much sense, right?
Because when here we go, she's starting with names. I can't remember anybody's names. When she's talking to the Suzy, Sarah, and that other woman comes to talk to her, and they start having an argument, Olga. And then Sarah's just sticking her tongue at her. She's like,
like names that starts with S, snakes. And I was just like, this is so childish. And then I was like, oh, that does make sense. There we go.
That makes sense. That is so funny. That is so funny. I love it. It's like, we're not going to do a school now. It's going to be, adults. Will you change? No, I don't think so. I think it works.
It does work, absolutely. Yeah, that's it. So, the quote I found about this says, many protagonists and characters of fairy tales were children, so it seems fitting that Argento originally wrote Suzy Banyon and her classmates at the Academy as being no more than 12 years old, but the studio and his producer, Salvatore, wouldn't let him make that version of the script, so he changed the range of their age to their 20s, but he did not rewrite the dialogue.
Couldn't be asked. We were like, you know what?
Exactly, like that will work.
Dialogue. Nobody watches my films for dialogue. It's fine. Just leave it.
And he was right.
But what I do think about Suzy, as someone who has decided to, travel, to leave her home, to come all this way to go to this prestigious school, couldn't even remember to bring her dance shoes. It's your first day. Why have you not got your dance shoes?
It doesn't seem terribly committed. I mean, and that's the thing about the 1977 version is that, there we go. I'm starting. I did say to you, I was like, let's count how many times I'm going to say it 1977 version. So in the original, it feels like it could take place anywhere apart from a dance school. Yeah. Because there is so very little dancing happening. And the dancing that is happening is not of terribly great quality.
Yes. Yes, I think that's fair. I think that's a fair statement. So
especially when they're being conducted by Mrs. Tanner, who in my opinion looks like Truncheon from, from Matilda.
When I saw it, I was like, oh, Miss Trunchbull's here. And she's got them clacky shoes, and all you hear is clacky shoes all the time. Yeah, she's fantastic. She looks like a dance school teacher, though, doesn't she? She gives you that matronly vibe. But what I will say about Suzy, what she lacks in commitment, she makes up for in clothing, because that waistcoat with a big tulle skirt on it, I want.
So good. I want that.
Must have it. This is fantastic. I love dance clothes. I've got no idea why. I always have. Give me a leotard and I'm there. But I do think the clothes in it are marvellous.
They really are. Yeah.
So everyone's so glamorous, and it's so like of at top as well, like that, like a waistcoat with a big tulle skirt on it. Why not though? Why not? She says, why not? I'm an artist. But then we see, in contrast, the guy who drops the suitcase off has jeans so tight that you can see the change in his pockets.
It's supposed to be the love interest. Like
oh my God. He's definitely infertile with them jeans. Absolutely. So, yes. So then Suzy walks down a corridor and gets dazzled by an ornament, as you do. As you do.
Yeah, there's very strange, like, what is that woman holding a bit of mirror and, like, reflecting it, and all of a sudden she's like, oh, I feel so faint.
Oh, my God. Oh, I must sit down. Oh, no, I've been dazzled by this mysterious ornament. It's a mirror, love. It's just a mirror. But so she's dazzled, and then we do see a little bit that she's quite willful, not as willful I think as we will see in the 2018 iteration of Suzy, but she's like refusing to stay. She's like, I'm not going to stay at school. I'm going to stay in this apartment where I've been.
She's
and
very strong,
very strong-minded there, but then collapses while she's exercising, and then just accepts it, and then starts hemorrhaging out of her nose and her eyes and her.
Exactly, but it's really interesting because it happens just after she said, no, I took a room at Olga, who hates me, but we're going to be besties, so that's fine. And then Madame Blanc is like, whatever, you do whatever you want, but she's clearly upset by it, and it's just straight after that, she falls over and bleeds and is kind of forced to stay then at the school. So, the wills and emotions already. Yeah,
we see the start of these witchy machinations as she collapses. Now, what I would like to say is that Professor Verdegast, who is the doctor that treats her, I would like him to be my primary physician he said she can't eat fruit, but she can drink wine. Fine.
Yeah, I know, it's great. It reminded me of that that diet that in the 70s there was a famous diet in Vogue, I think, with like you were allowed a black coffee and a glass of wine. As the day increased, you like more and more wine.
A bottle of wine a day on this diet.
Exactly. Yeah.
So
clearly, you read that.
And then throughout the rest of the film, until she starts to think that something's wrong, she's drinking a pint of wine a day.
Yeah, with every meal. Somebody even comments on it, or someone thinks Sarah says to her, it's kind of like, what kind of doctor is that?
What was this guy? What's he said? Wine. You can have a pint of wine 3 times a day, but no fruit. So then we get what is perhaps one of the most disgusting scenes, which is that a load of maggots start to drop. Now, what's interesting about that is that, well, I suppose we could read that 2 ways, because the witches, we're not getting any spoilers there, they are in fact witches who run academy, seem quite disturbed by these maggots.
Yeah.
So it's not clear at that point then if they've done this on purpose to build this situation where everybody's got to be in a room together, or is it Madame Marcos who's,
Exactly. I wasn't sure. I was going to ask you, like, if what you made of this, because you're right. They seem pretty surprised as well that this has happened, and it doesn't seem like this is something that they've put in motion.
No.
Although it is quite convenient then that everybody is then forced to then sleep in the dance hall.
Yeah, but it does seem strange that they don't see, and also that's too many maggots for one. For
one case of food, yeah.
That's like a rain, a tidal wave of maggots. That's too many maggots.
I'd be like, I'm not buying it, definitely.
But then we do get to have some incredible close-up of Miss Trunchbull's incredible boots. So
she wouldn't have been out of sort in The Witches.
She's very witches.
Out, right?
I thought as well she were quite dominatrix here. There was something quite...
Totally.
Yeah, quite, quite, you've been naughty about her.
I was going to say, step on me and call me a naughty schoolgirl.
But then they go in this dormitory. One of them says, it's just like camp. And my note for that is, my idea of hell, I'd rather sleep with maggots.
Yeah, we've talked about this extensively when we did the summer camp horror, and like one thing that was very clear is that you hate camp.
I hate camp. I don't want to sleep. I don't want to hear 30 people's breath when I'm trying to go to sleep. Right? That's too much for me. I don't want to be in a room full of people when I'm trying to go to sleep. It's just...
I feel like everybody is like very, like they're so up for it. It feels like nobody is thinking, where can somebody give us a proper explanation as to where those maggots come from? Instead, they're all like, this is great.
This is so fun.
This is so comfortable. I love it.
Look at my little trundle bed. Where have all these beds come from? They're like, put me up beds. Why have they got all
them up?
Well, yeah. But that makes sense as well now you're saying that it was meant to be children, because they react in that way that kids would be like, oh, it's fun, it's like camping, whereas adult women would be like,
I can't think of anything worse.
So like, I pay an exorbitant amount for tuition here. Put me in an hotel, please. Thank you. I'm not staying here. But we see it, and then for some reason they decide to turn our lights off apart from a red light bulb.
That would make it impossible to sleep, but beautiful to film, but
it is a very I think that setup is so visually just sumptuous as well, because it is this red light and then it's sheets, and we're just seeing seeing shapes behind these sheets, and so you can't really see what's happening. And I do really love that. But then we hear this like horrible snoring. Like
I just love the fact that Sarah is, talking to Suzy and be like, "Do you hear that noise? Where is it coming from?" It's like it's clearly coming from right behind you. There is a thin curtain separating you.
It's a bed sheet.
Exactly. You're just like, I don't not understand like the sense of mystery there. It's like you could take a peek.
Maybe where could that noise be coming from? Oh no!
Exactly.
It's right behind you.
As we say, because they are supposed to be children, then maybe it makes sense that
maybe children have got maybe they've got no sense of direction when it comes to
Probably,
sound.
Yeah.
But we see that there's this sinister shape, and we assume that the directress, the mysterious Mother Marcos, is behind the sheet. But what I did like,
she needs a nose strip, like that.
Oh my god, nose strip. She needs to be sleeping like sat up. I don't know what she needs, but that noise coming out of her is horrendous. But we do see that Sarah is a little bit of a hellcat. She is sort of arguing with everybody at all times. She's always up for a row, Sarah. Every
loves
time
to pick up a fight.
Loves a fight. Every time somebody looks at her, she's like, "What are you fucking looking at?" I love it. I love it.
She doesn't look like much, but she's definitely like the girl you want or you don't want on a night out with you. It's like after 2 drinks, she's a fucking nightmare. She will start shit with everyone.
Yeah, she's just that's it. You're looking at me. What you're looking at? Let's go outside. Catch me outside. She's that sort of energy. But then we see that sinister little Albert, who looks like one of the children he looks like one of Midwich Cuckoos, doesn't he? He's like Children of the Damned. Oh, this sinister boy just looking at everybody, just lurking about place.
Yeah, completely mute, but
never says a word, just lingers about looking at everybody. He gets chomped by the piano player's guide dog. Which I'm sure the dog had his reasons, and I would have bit Albert as well.
But he also looked like he's been, the attack is not unprovoked, right?
Yeah.
Because
he did something to that dog. That dog reacted in self-defense. That's my perspective.
Exactly.
Freedom, justice for the dog. But then what I like about this is, so this is obviously starting to move us towards the more sinister aspect, is that when the piano player gets very irate about these, baseless accusations that his dog's aggressive, he leaves, as you would. But what we've seen up to this point is, apart from Suzy being like in airport and then in Olga's flat, it's a very single location and it's very small spaces.
Yeah.
But then when we see this guy he's walking across this massive open square.
Yes.
And it's so brilliantly done because it's pitch black, like you can't, you can't see, but you start to hear that little sort that these sinister grumblings again, and it's quite Lost Boys actually. It made me.
That was my note. It is so like the opening scene of Lost Boy in the car park. I was like, yes,
yeah, it is. It really is. But then you think that we're finally going to see who this shadowy killer is, and instead, no. Attacked by his own dog.
Yeah. No, that's
Cruel.
It is brilliant, and like compared to the striking, lighting in all the other scenes. Like this one is very monochrome, it's kind of it's very but yeah, I mean the way it builds up is so, and with the Goblin soundtrack as well, it's just absolutely, and in this film then something batshit crazy is about to happen because the music crescendo side it just goes hard.
And then
jump scares.
It's brilliant, but then it is that very giallo trope of this shadowy killer then, that we sort of have a bit of a killer point of view, and we sort of see someone's like creeping about. I think, is it Sarah that says to Suzy that maybe there's a hex on the place?
Yes, she does. Yeah, you can see Sarah is starting to feel more and more paranoid about what is happening in the school.
And then, do we find out then that is that when we find out that it was she who were talking to Patricia?
Yes, that's right. That's right. Like, not so long after that, we find out that Patricia she was keeping a lot of journals or notes, and she'd given all of it to Sarah, who hadn't really looked at it until then.
Why would you?
Like, why would you? Like, your friend has just disappeared.
Your friend's disappeared. Police are looking for her. Everyone's out in force trying to find where she's gone, and you've got all these journals, and you've just sat on it and thought, well, that can't be relevant.
Can't be bothered. Too long didn't read.
Can't need that. But yeah, so that's when we start to get, a bit of an understanding that maybe there's sort of witchcraft, maybe there's a hex on the place. And Sarah decides she's going to investigate, which is when we get what has to be one of the worst death scenes that I've ever seen.
Oh, God, yeah.
It's absolutely vile. It's brilliant, but it's vile. And I remember first time I watched it with my partner, and we both knew it would come. I'd remembered it would come in this time, and I was like, oh no.
Yeah, it is.
And then he remembered and started going, oh no. Oh,
I remember where this is going.
So Sarah's sort of running through the school, and we see these glowing eyes again that we'd seen when Patricia died. That are very they're like Alice in Wonderland when Cheshire Cat disappears.
Yes,
it's just
very
his
much like
eyes.
that,
it's like that, isn't it? And then there's just this relentless pursuit by this shadowy killer, and she hides in a room, and then there's that horrible razor. They've got razor through.
I know, that is trying to open the door. That is so stressful.
Which you do start to think that perhaps this is on purpose, because they could easily have opened that latch, but instead what they let her do is see
just
a little window.
Her, and then think I could escape through that window.
So she starts to climb up to this little window. The worst decision she could ever have made, because
exactly. But who would have? How could she have?
How could she have known? Because she couldn't see; it was dark, and she drops into this room and finds out then it's a pit of barbed wire.
It's exactly who could have foreseen that in the belly of this school was a room entirely filled with barbed wire. I mean, nobody could see this coming, but yes, it's so visceral. And every time she makes a movement, I think it's so like the acting is just brilliant as well, because you just kind of like you can feel,
it's giving me shivers. It's made me feel sick.
The only thing that's missing is salt dropping from the ceiling to make it far worse for her.
That's what they should have done. They should have just I'd like it. So she's trapped in this barbed wire. She can't get out. Obviously, that's the nature of barbed wire. And that's the end of poor old Sarah.
So she drops in the barbed wire and she managed to pretty much crawl out of it, and then gets her throat sliced by the famous Giallo gloved killer as well. So it's like as if that wasn't bad enough.
I mean, left her all tangled up in it for long enough.
No escape. Exactly. No escape for Sarah.
So then we see that this is apparently, the quote I've got is a school of dance and occult sciences, which, I mean...
Yes!
Sign me up. This sounds incredible. This is the education I deserved.
Yeah, all of a sudden the lack of dancing makes a lot more sense when you are being made aware of what the school actually is.
It's a front. It's a front for the occult sciences aspect.
Exactly.
But we see that Suzy is talking to this doctor, who is
Frank Mandel,
who is thank you, Clelia. You knew I didn't know, and I appreciate that. He's studying occult, forces. He says occult in a really weird way. It's aggravating.
Oh no, sorry, that's the old because at first she talks with Frank Mandel, who was named in one of the notes from Pat, I think, and that's the young guy she talks to.
That's it. Yes,
played by a really really young Udo Kier, by the way, which I was like, I know this guy. Who is he? And then he introduces her to. The older.
While he's talking to her and she's talking to him about, this really serious thing that like 2 women have disappeared, and he's just drinking a Coke.
Yeah. No, absolutely not concerned.
Not bothered. It's just like, nightmare that. Oh, hold on. Let me just finish.
Exactly. I know. I did find it weird that I was like, on that particular day, they seem to be having like a buffet outside the psychiatry department. That's what they do, I suppose. That and can't pronounce occult.
Oh God, honestly, it keeps saying, and I know that is a way that some people say occult, but he really I will like stop saying it. Just stop saying it. It's really weird. But then he's talking about, what does it mean to be a witch? And his perspective is very much it's mental illness. And he says bad luck isn't caused by broken mirrors, it's caused by broken minds, which I thought was for a giallo film. quite
heavy.
But then he goes on to tell Suzy that witches are only malefic, that they're destructive and can only do harm. So we're seeing a real positioning there.
This is a real mansplaining moment, is what I
and
like.
And a very misogynist approach to witchcraft and the occult.
Absolutely.
But he goes on to tell her that a coven deprived of its leader is a headless cobra. So again, we're seeing this idea about poisonous, dangerous women. So Suzy decides that perhaps this pint of wine and plate of slop that they keep giving her every day is perhaps not doing her much good because she can't stay awake for more than 10 minutes after she's... I mean, that might be the pint of wine.
Low tolerance to red wine, or when she throws it in the sink, you realise it's actually red paint, so you're like, maybe...
Yeah, maybe you've got lead poisoning.
Exactly, yeah. Make a lot more sense, I guess.
But when she's throwing all that food in the toilet and it's splashing there, we're like, oh, gross. But yeah, so she starts to think that there's, sinister, malefic, harmful games afoot. So what we find then is that the police are really not bothered that women are going missing.
Could not give a shit.
That's the realest. To be fair, that's the realest thing about this film.
Yeah, it is. Yeah,
police don't give a shit. 2 women missing. You say, oh well. But then we find Suzy has dropped, thrown this slop away, tipped a pint of wine paint away, and then she's attacked by a bat.
I know, but she kills that bat in the.
It's honestly, cute, that bat as well.
Yeah. I did find that really shocking. I was like, I'm not down with this.
She squashes this poor innocent bat. She has no thought that she might have rabies. That doesn't seem to be a concern at all. But then we find the full-on Argento technicolor nightmare of the third act, which is absolutely wonderful in every way. So we've got the colours, she's searching through, she finds this room full of just cool shit. Like
literally,
just
like
full
the
of,
best. You're just like, why did they hide? I mean, I can understand why they're hiding away this part of the school. This is like, the VIP section, literally.
Yeah. So we see, there's this like really incredible space where, there's all these esoteric sort of symbols and artifacts and everything's all there. Looks like my dream living room, to be honest.
Absolutely.
That's what I'm going for.
Really cool little fact actually about the corridor that she walks in, that corridor leading to the inner sanctum of the witches. You can see on the wall, etched in gold on the wall, the inscription Sadducismus Triumphatus. And Sadducismus Triumphatus is a book on witchcraft that was written by Joseph Glanville, published posthumously in England in 1681, and it was the book that influenced Cotton Mather in his pamphlet Discourse on Witchcraft, and which became the main text that the Salem witch trials were based on. So again, I was like, in terms of research, I love that.
Oh, I really like that. That's really this is thing. I think quite often there's a push to suggest that horror, and particularly things that use tropes like witchcraft, that there's no. It's just surface. There's no underneath, and so things like that show you that there is.
Exactly, could not be further from the truth with a film like this. Where people would, as you said, because it's so, stunning and exuberant in terms of, it's so colourful and stuff that people assume they just, this is where it's all artificial and there's no real depth to it, but there is.
They think it's all fur coat and no knickers, as they would say where I'm from. But yeah, so then we see Mother Marcos, who is a hag of the highest order. I don't think there's any other way to describe her.
Yeah.
And she knows who Suzy is, and in a very showing this showing that power and that that she everything, she knows everything that's going on. And also has the power to turn herself into invisible in some sort of glittery
from the School of Twilight.
Yeah. But Suzy decides that Mother Marcos must die. This idea that the leaderless coven is a headless cobra, and once again it's a dark and stormy night. I mean, it's not giving anything for Germany's tourism trade. And they're like, if you come to Germany,
weather's awful.
It's just going to rain all the time. And then,
and she stabs her. Yeah. I did find it. So Helena Marcos has the power of being invisible. However, all it takes is for Suzy to stab her outline for her to die.
Yeah,
And I was like,
just stabs
this
an
is
outline.
literally- Exactly, what's the point? Like,
So she's totally invisible unless there's lightning, in which case you can see her outline. I mean,
that was mad, and she took so long to like wield the knife that I was like, she could have just moved. Like.
She could have just moved away. She could have killed her first. I mean, I think at that point, that is where it's very fairy tale-esque.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the monster dies at the end.
Exactly.
You know,
and that's literally where it ends. You know, she kills her, and she just walks away. The buildings, suddenly combusts.
Yeah.
And she walks away, and she looks so happy rather than being fucking traumatized.
Wanders off it rain. Where's she going? She's in middle of nowhere. How's she getting anywhere?
Half an hour, she didn't even believe in witches, and all of a sudden she's just like, problem fucking sorted. Get me back to the airport. Taxi!
Yeah. So it is quite a blunt ending, I think, for, it's a lot of build up, but also, I mean, it's a perfect length. It's like an hour and 40 minutes, which,
it is,
that's all I want. If you can't tell it in an hour and 40 minutes, don't tell it.
Which takes us nicely to the length of the 2018 version.
Oh my God, right. Full disclosure, I saw it in 2018 and I nearly walked out at cinema and I hated it.
Same.
We, Clelia and I had a very friendly back and forth about whether we should have to include the 2018 version, because I was determined to say it was the biggest pile of shit.
I was as well. I was so disappointed when he first came out, but that's because I think there was so much expectation that this was going to be a remake. I found out, by the way, that Argento and Guadagnino are really good friends, actually, and that Argento doesn't like the 2018 version, which says it all, really. But I think it's best to think about it as a reimagining rather than a remake.
Yeah, I don't think it's definitely. I don't think you could say it's. To be fair, when I watched it, I just thought you could have easily told this exactly same story and not called it Suspiria.
Yes, and that's very true.
It doesn't need to be Suspiria. Like, you could have done this anyway. I suppose what you're dying to know, because I refuse to tell you, I've said I'd reveal it on the podcast. did I think it was a pile of shit on the rewatch?
Yeah.
No.
Yeah, I knew it, and that's what I said. Rewatch it now. Yes, I'm so glad. Okay, that's excellent.
So no, I didn't. But I will say that it is too fucking long.
It is extremely long.
It's too long. 2.5 hours.
It is. Yes, it is so long. I totally agree. I did my usual where, I can either, watch like 5 hours of film straight, or I have to watch a film like in like 3 parts.
Yeah.
So I did this with this one, to be able to digest it all. And yes, it is very long, but there's also some sequences that are so... I don't know, like it's a film that I would find it hard to edit it down, because I think the scenes that are long, they're also very necessary, or they bring something more. I mean, the dance sequence are just so extraordinary, I think, that, it was worth keeping them in.
I disagree, but...
That's fine.
I think they could have removed that entire subplot about that psychiatrist.
Oh, okay.
I think they really could have took that out, a lot of that out, and just add a bit at the beginning where he sees Patrizia, and just add him as like the witness sort of at the end, and I didn't need to know about his summer house and his wife, and it just, so much of that film is like this guy sitting in his house with this woman making him soup, and I'm like, I don't need it. What is it adding? So I think if they'd have took that out, I mean, they'd have saved 45 minutes, an hour.
And more than that, the amount of time that he must have taken to put Tilda Swinton in that makeup.
Like,
would have.
So I do think that they could have cut that. And yeah, the dance sequences are really, visually really arresting. But again, once I've seen Dakota Johnson humping the floor for 10 minutes, I've seen
that's
it.
Enough, yeah.
That's enough.
Okay. Well, I will disagree on that, and that's totally fine. But I did think, in terms of the storyline with the psychiatrist, even though it is very convoluted, and all the politics elements of the film, and I think that's what I really didn't like about it when I first watched it. I was like, this is so far removed from the original. But like we said, he is definitely putting threads from the original and making something out of it, which I really like. But I'll tell you one thing that I thought about rewatching it this time, and was further confirmed by a fantastic article that I found online that I'm going to link to in the show notes by John Trafton called History is What Hurts, is that the 2018 version is closer to Possession that is closer to the original Suspiria, because that whole setup about divided Berlin in 1977, and all the stuff that's happening in the background, and all how that feeds into the themes of the film is just so. It really did make me think of that film. I did wonder if you had the same thought.
I did, and I actually really liked the political element of it.
So did I. A lot more this time around.
I really liked that it had a very historical and socio-political context. I thought that were really good.
And a really strong feminist message as well, I thought, which, might play out, more or less successfully depending who. But I think this is where the storyline with the psychiatrist comes in, because I do like when the witch is taking him and they shout at him, because the whole thing is about, him not being able to get his wife out of, out of Germany. And, and they say you call, when women come to you telling the truth, you tell them they have delusions. You had so much time to get your wife, you're making basically you supposed to be, you paint yourself as the victim, but women are the victim. But all the little references throughout the film I found very interesting. At the beginning of the film, I noticed that so Miss Tanner mentions to Suzy that the school operates a Ruth Bray model for their boarding facilities, and I'd heard the name and I wasn't sure, so I looked it up. And Ruth Bray was a German advocate for women's rights, a writer, journalist, and a radical critic of patriarchy, and she'd funded Musterschutz, which is an organization that aimed to improve women's standing in law, economics, and society. So just even to little elements that they drops in that fit very well with the social political era of the film, but that that carries this thread of motherhood and women looking after each other.
Absolutely. I think. And we can talk about that, because I think that's the main theme, really, in it, about women and motherhood. But what really struck me is the real. It's so grey, which I know were intentional, and that was something that director said that he wanted to do that. But you get this real contrast between this, the real Baroque romanticism 1977 version, and then this brutalist architecture of Berlin at that time, at Berlin Walls there, and it really positions it. I thought it were interesting to bring them from this building on outskirts in a woodland smack into a city. And they're in the middle of everything. In
front of the wall, in
front of the wall, and this wall is just this ever-present reminder that, and they are talking about the war and the Holocaust and things, but there's this constant reminder that political unrest is still it's still there. They're still living in this, and like you say, in a way that I think Possession does really well. And I agree that I think it is much closer probably to Possession.
Definitely. I think the thing that it does differently, and I think because of the time that it was made, I think whereas Possession, acts as a timestamp of, it's very much reflecting on what was happening at the time in Germany, whereas this one is very much a look back at the past in order to inform the future, almost saying, because there is a few reference to we should never let this happen again. And actually it's kind of but, this is exactly where we are now. And when it came out, obviously Brexit was, was very much, fresh in people's mind. And, the Trump election, basically the world going to absolute shit, and us, doing the same thing over and over again, basically.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the sort of development of Suzy's character ties into that as well, that sort of, because we see that she is from it's not Mormon, is she Mormon? Amish. She's Amish, so but what I thought were interesting is that you see her home is like the school in the original. It's at the end of this long road. It's in middle of nowhere because obviously they're farming. And she's, they develop that much more. And obviously we see again and again in film about a mum and this guilt that she's left her. She's dying and she's run away basically to Germany. But that she's got no, there's no training. She's just got this like raw talent.
Yes.
But what I wondered watching it, and I know I am, in fact, no, I'll wait, I'll come back to it because it's near the end. So I'll...
Okay.
but one of the things that's interesting is as they're introducing Suzy, and you've already touched on it, is that one of the, I forgot which matron it is, but she says, we fully understand the importance of a woman's autonomy. Like they're saying, this is part of what we do. And then, says about how during war they kept school open, and then post-Nazi regime they kept it going and they kept this school going. And, this, I think that the treatment of this coven and the women in this film, I don't always think is feminist. I think there's still a very, there's still a very obvious male gaze, particularly in fact that there's so, like as we get towards end of film, it's like, oh, witchcraft equals nudity. How many naked women can we get in one place? But I think that there is that feminist undertone to it, which is this is a school led by women who have endured until
exactly
until De Swinton's character. So Madame Blanc, she comes back to that again and again and again, and there's Tilda Swinton saying to, sorry, I should say Madame Blanc. I just love Tilda Swinton so much, and saying to Suzy that dance cannot be beautiful or cheerful, and we need to break the nose of every beautiful thing. And this is directly rooted in this post-war, post-Holocaust context. That dance now, it's not the the pretty ballet of the 1977 version. It's this very aggressive, modern, interpretive dance that is designed to be confrontational.
Yes, exactly. I think this is why that Volks sequence is so important and what it reflects. And what that quote, she says it again to the audience that dance can never be cheerful again.
Yeah.
And it's just I just find that really powerful. Like, to your point, and I agree that not everything in the film feels authentically. The message is not can be a bit frayed in terms of it's feminism, but I completely lost my train of thoughts. So describe that.
But I think as well that when we see that dance, particularly when Suzy first performs, because obviously she's turned up, she's got no training, it's basically an audition, they're all smoking.
Yeah.
While she's auditioning, everyone's got a fag in this auditioning room. But we start to see these tensions, and obviously Patrizia, I will continue to say Patrizia because somebody calls her that at one point, and I really like to say it in that way. Yeah. Patrizia has disappeared. And Olga is really upset about this, and she's very confrontational with Madame Blanc. She's like, you hypocrites, what? And she runs out, and she's so unflappable, Madame Blanc, and she says it's a hot thing we do. She's like, it's just a blood's got out. But she's so magnetic and she's so caring and gentle, and I think
she is. I did find that really great, that the reimagining of her character, actually, because she is very. Yes, she cares a lot. She's the mother figure. She's maternal, definitely.
I was just going to say, they've got all these motherless girls in this academy, and it is. But you see that many. Obviously, we see what Suzy's not seeing and what other women aren't seeing. But you see how that maternal thread is a manipulation.
Absolutely. And it feels very conditional, that's for certain.
And so, they know what's happened to Patrizia, but instead she's saying to Olga, maybe she's died for her beliefs, maybe she were in this bomb, maybe she's dead. She, she had these ideas, and but really talking about it in this way, that these decisions should be respected. We should respect her if she wants to blow herself up for her beliefs. We should respect that she's left. And it's this like constant just this manipulation, and even bringing Suzy in and going, you're going to dance lead when she's brand new, and
absolutely
building them tensions.
kind of, building on what, what you're saying, and, to the point that the film doesn't, is not necessarily straightforward in its feminist message, and I completely agree with you. But that there is this feeling that, yes, the love that they give to those girls is, is very conditional. And that's the part where, like, the feminist message is quite frayed, right? Because there is... that manipulation part that is part of that mother and daughter relationship as well, but or the fact that they're not concerned. I mean, this Coven of Witches is obviously not concerned about the political aspect of what is happening in the world right now, and that's because obviously they, their history is so much longer than this, and all they care about is like the continuation, the legacy of of what they're doing, to be able to to carry on. Really, I found a great quote about it actually, which is this idea of a troop of witches in a weird form of sadness trying to cheat death, and I think that's portrayed so well throughout the film, and especially through the character of Madame Blanc, who's she is the more nurturing of them all, but it's they call to the idea of false motherhood at the end, and it's this pretty much what their downfall is, really. But I think it's played out so beautifully through her character.
It really is, and then one of the problems I had with it the first time I watched it was the scene with Olga, because I thought it were absolutely just thought, and I remember saying at the time that I thought it were just such an unnecessary misogynist brutalizing of a woman's body, and I had a whole lot of problems with it. But and it's interesting this actually, because on rewatching it, so I saw it in cinema with my partner, and we were talking about it, and I said about, well, even that scene, so I had this real visceral response to it. I nearly walked out. I thought it were vile. I thought it were unnecessary, and it were really prolonged. And watching it this time, I think that what I felt were and this is from someone who really loves body horror, but I don't like body horror if I feel it's like, just...
Yeah, for the wrong reasons,
But that idea of these two bodies in tandem, and the way that Suzy's got this power, and she doesn't know that she's doing it, but through, and obviously Madame Blanc knows she's doing it. She's caused this. Yeah. I thought that as a way to show the power that she's got, that were a really good way to show it, even though I still thought it were awful. I still thought
do you mean like, I think it was a good way of showing that, this, this power comes with, it's almost like grey power comes with, not responsibility, but also with grey harm, rather, It's like it's really at the expenses of, of something else, of someone else, of, the power balance is never, established.
Yeah, and but I also thought it were interesting as well how my perspective on that had changed, because from 2018 to now, and it's interesting to reflect on that, I think, because like you said earlier, the things that had happened up to 2018, but then the things that have happened since then to now, and the way that your interaction not only with film and media, but with the world, how that changes your perspective. And I thought it were a really interesting thing to watch again. And
yes, exactly. It's like films in general it's always great to be able to revisit them and revisit or perception of them, but this one in particular, I think I'm the same as you. When I first saw it, really, I did not gel with it at all. Both in terms of my expectation of what the film was going to be, but what it was saying, it was just, it seemed, completely, to just, completely miss the point of what, Suspiria, should be. And it's really interesting to think in a space of like 5-6 years, it's completely, certainly my perception and my reading of it has completely changed.
Yeah, it is. And I think it is through, when you see other things like Possession, for instance, or you see other films that are dealing with similar themes, I suppose, and like it just alters the way that you look at it. And I just thought that were really a really interesting shift.
Yeah, absolutely.
I was just going to say, but then they stab her full of hooks and they drag her off.
Yes.
But that even in itself feels quite ceremonial, because they all do it. So they're all working together. And then we see that there is this sort of power struggle, which I think is interesting that they brought that element in. So between Madame Blanc and Mother Marcos, that there's this idea that there's a changing of the guard. Half of people are for it, half of people are against it, and it brings this like internal conflict alongside all this external conflict that we see through like news reports and on radio and everything else.
Yeah, definitely. And the idea of the false prophet, I thought, is really, really interesting. And when at the the climax of the film, the ending is really, really interesting in terms of, obviously the idea of false motherhood, but also, false prophet.
And that really, it has got that to it, hasn't it? Like they're doing things like collecting everybody's piss and like, just doing all these like things, but then there's this power, between Suzy, and then we see the sinister gnarled hand of Mother Marcos on the seat on the floor, like so it's as though she's in middle of this power struggle. I do think that certain things though, like when she has this meeting with Madame Blanc and she's like, what about dance? And we hear she's had this really brutal, Amish childhood, and she's a desire for dance, and really a desire for Madame Blanc is that there's a lot of tension between them, as like led her astray and she's left all this life behind. But it's just when she goes, I felt like what I think it must feel like to fuck. And I was like, oh.
I know, like, big zero for that one.
PU, because there is a sensuality to it, but it's not necessarily a sexuality.
Absolutely,
And even in, there's the amazing nightmare sequences. Like these flashes are like bruised flesh and violence and pain, but we've still got to have a set of tits in there.
Yeah,
couldn't have,
It's still films made by men.
Couldn't tell that story without showing some tits. So, and also a third criticism: the clothes aren't as nice, although they do have a lot of capes. And I like that.
Yeah, they do. I think Madame Blanc's wardrobe is like
she's got some
point.
Wonderful capes. She looks marvellous.
Right.
But what I think you see is that there's obviously characters are more developed because it's 4 days long, so that gives them plenty of time. But there's much more curiosity in Suzy in this one. And earlier on, she's much more engaged. Like when Sarah's got these notebooks, and when Sarah's like saying, "Oh, I think there's something weird going on."
Exactly. But then it does make sense in terms of what she is, and it's in terms of, I mean, she's such a different. She's polar opposite from the character that she is in the original one, isn't she?
She's very. I mean, she's actually a bit of a cheeky fuck because
she is.
She goes, "I don't think we should choreograph it like this," and it's like, what this dance that they've been doing for like 30 years or something. You think it should be different.
She's like she's such a Sarah in the craft.
She's so Sarah,
natural witch.
Yeah, she is. She's such a Sarah. She's a Sarah. That's absolutely who she is. But yeah, like they're all. It's interesting that there's like a nod to Argento when she's dreaming, because we see like the colours. The colours that we start to see, and that they're all dreaming about like airballs in toilets. Like that's what Sarah said. She's like, "Oh, I was dreaming about airballs in toilets for
4 weeks." I'd be like, "Oh, I'd be really worried if
that." I'd be like freaking out.
I do like the leitmotif of with her mother's breathing, and it's obviously in the original when they hear Elena Marcos breathing.
Yeah, it's
like
tied
this.
in, isn't it? Like that is a really interesting like motif in it. I think that her mum's like death rattling.
Yes.
And then we also hear that Marcos, we see that she's doing that still, and it's like this thread to draw them together. And there's so much in it about, like this ready intimacy of women. Like they're all very intimate very quickly because they're all in this space together. And that is being, manipulated and used against them. But
yes.
It's, and we see that they're sort of taking skills and strength from other dancers to get to Suzy, and this, and we see that one of the members at Coven, she kills herself. This woman who I don't think she's got a line in it. She's just...
No, exactly. She was actually look really worried with her big glasses. And then gets really upset at dinner after the fight.
And then just like, slits her own throat.
Fuck democracy.
Yeah, but it is interesting that like talking about I think Madame Blanc says to her, like, love and manipulation share houses very often. And she's talking about this idea. It's like, well, that's what you're doing. That's exactly what you're doing with these girls.
Yeah, there's that great scene when the girls are out on the town and they walk past the restaurant and they see the matrons all around the table, and there is, they're talking to each other, like saying, oh, it's good for Suzy to see us like this, to, for the girls to see us as part of the world. And I just did find it like really... Yeah, like an interesting juxtaposition as well.
It is, and that we get. I mean, it keeps some of the the ideas like counting the steps. So like Sarah counts the steps and she follows it to find this tunnel, and it keeps those like key points, but then it does develop these ideas so much more about women in together and what power looks like in that. And it is a very physical film. I think it's there's a lot of screaming and huffing and
it's intense,
pumping,
which is why
pumping the floor and legs breaking and stuff like that. But it's just so interesting how how you were talking about these three mothers and how that's much more developed, which I'm obsessed with. I think that is
absolutely.
So interesting.
The whole mythology around it is just we need more. We need more.
And it's really interesting how the Doctor does say, and tying it again about you can give someone your delusion, and that's what religion is, and that far right had these esoteric symbols, which they did. That they Nazi Party had like a department that were looking at how to cast spells and shit. They were really into this idea of the occult. Thank you, occult. But they were really into it. So, and I think that's a bit of an uncomfortable like pairing for me, that you sort of comparing these women to this, But it is, I suppose it is relevant. And what I don't get, though, and I feel like I can't sit on this anymore. I've been trying to be like chronological, but I can't. Is so when we see, obviously at the end, so Susie's communicating telepathically at this point with Madame Blanc. She's like accepted that it's a coven. She's totally happy to be part of it. She's going to be sacrificed for Marcos so that Marcos can live on. And we see all this, and we see that a mum. When Priest is there, and he says about like let your sins go, and she said, "My daughter is my sin.
My sin.
She's what I smeared on the world." But that's frustratingly not developed, because when we get to end, then she comes in naked. Is that a prerequisite that Dakota Johnson's got to be naked in a chiffon like kaftan?
Maybe she's the one putting it in her contract.
She's very comfortable with her body, and why not?
Exactly,
live
why
and
not?
let live. But we see when she comes into this like sacrifice, that then she's not Suzy, she is Mother Suspiria. But was she always that then?
I'm so glad you asked. Because that's exactly what I didn't get the first time I watched it. I'm not saying I get it now, but it seems to me that yes, she is, because when you get the flashback of her flashbacks of her childhood, and there is this thing about the table, and they're like, we're supposed to be looking at the United States for geography, and like she keeps looking at Berlin, and she keeps drawing those arrows. Like she is drawn to the place, like she knows that eventually this is where she will be led. And I do wonder if she's always been that, basically she's always been Mother Suspiria, or that evil being unleashed on the world, or once she can feel that this coven of witches is trying to double cross the mothers. Not in my time, not on my watch.
And the thing is, I really loved that final sequence.
So did I. I am she.
I am she.
Someone said.
Yeah, she's like, oh, did you pledge allegiance to her? And she's like, Mother Suspiria.
And
then she's like, I am she.
I am she.
And then she like rips her chest up and
she's
but what I love is how it's like death to any other mother. She says, do you death?
Yes.
She asked Suzy first, didn't she? She's like, do you God, I can't think of a word. Hold on. she says to Suzy, like, death to any other mother, that's what you'll have to do to be this vessel, because that's what she's supposed to be, a vessel for Mother Marcos. And that's when she says to her, oh, did you pledge to? And then she's like, I am she. You're like, oh, shit.
And then like, you can see all of them like voting again, and like, you kind of like, you fucked yourself.
Yeah, that's it. And then, you know, Death, she summons Death, who comes slithering out of this like all-lit floor and kills everybody who were Team Marcos.
And looks so good doing
and
it.
Looks so
literally,
good doing
I'm
it.
Such a big fan.
Yeah, and then, but obviously at this point, poor Blanca's being semi-decapitated.
Yeah.
Very bloodthirsty by the end.
She would have done so well.
But it's, I think, but then what we see in that, which I like, I think this film should have finished there.
I agree. 100% agree. I do not understand why. I don't. But I think I'm guessing it's because of the political message behind it. As in kind of like we look back to the past to inform our future sort of thing. You know, in terms like this should never happen again. But it doesn't work. I agree. I think the film should have ended
I think if it finished there, then because it's this really frenzied scene and there's all this bloodshed and you know there's Death wandering about, and then she's gentle when she goes to Sarah and Patrizia, and she's like, what do you want? And they're like, death. I want to die. Because obviously it's so beautiful and loving, and like she's like, I am mother, what do you want? And that's what they want, and she gives it to him, but in a very gentle way. I mean, obviously, by that point, poor Patrizia looks like a bit of beef jerky. I mean, she's been just
sending, but
oh my god, she is so dehydrated by that point. God knows what they've been doing to her, poor lass. And then the start of the ritual, Sarah's just been disemboweled. So like, you know, so I suppose I understand asking for. I'd be like, can you make me normal again? Can I not be disemboweled?
Exactly. Could we just rewind? And can I just never join this school?
Yeah, but like, if I'm going to stay like this, I'd rather be dead. So what can you do? But then, you know, it's very frenzied, it's very frenetic. There's all these like naked, obviously. You know, other dancers are all very frenzied, and it's this really, really beautiful scene. And that to me should have been it. But then obviously she goes to talk to the doctor and tells him about his wife dying. And again, she's kind. It's horrible.
Yeah.
It's an horrible truth, but
it seems to me that she would have other shit to attend to than to go and see him and explain to him, you know, what's happened. And I don't know if you've actually watched the film until after the credit, but there is a little. I hadn't either before now, and there is a little scene just after the credit where we see Suzy basically locking up the school and leaving. She's just literally my work here is done.
Why put that at end? At credits? Who's watching to end at credits?
No, it's like this isn't the Avengers movie. You know? Like we don't need a.
But yeah, because that's interesting, I suppose. Because if she has always been, you know, mother, then I suppose it makes sense that maybe she is trying to get rid of this coven. Yeah. Because they're not doing what. Maybe they've got too power mad. You know?
They've abused the power. Yeah. They've abused the power. That was.
Yeah. But that's a really interesting, because I would just like, was she always this then? And like, why would she be born to like an Amish family in middle of, you know?
I know. I think that's very abstract.
Yeah, I think that's,
to say the least.
That's the weird bit for me. But, you know, I think that.
But then the three mothers are supposed to be from, you know, different places.
Yeah, I suppose so. I suppose that makes more sense then. I did think, what is happening? Why is she like saying I am she? Like, was she always she? Or
yeah, exactly. A big headed.
Yeah, I am she, Mother Suspiria.
I am the lead dancer, and I am the mother, and I am this, and now everybody obeys me. Okay. Yeah,
I am everything.
I am Dakota Johnson, so shut up, everyone.
Well, yeah, I do think it is full of the weird girlies. We've got Dakota Johnson, Tilda Swinton, and Mia Goth. I mean,
oh my god, I know. Trio
of the weird girlies that we love to see.
Talking of trio, actually, like I just feel like I need to shoehorn this fact in, because obviously the film is famous because Tilda Swinton plays all the parts in it. I mean, she plays three different characters, and you get me thinking. are there any other actors who have played three characters in the same film? And I found a few actually. So Michael J. Fox in Back to the Future, Back to the Future 2, sorry. Alex Winter in Bill and Ted's Bogus Journey. Cheech Marin in From Dusk Till Dawn also plays three characters. And Peter Sellers in Doctor Strangelove. So there you go.
There we go.
So, sorry, Tilda, not that original, I'm afraid.
I mean, yeah, she must have had, a lot of work to do on this film, like having to be three different people.
Exactly.
And, very, looking very different.
Yeah. I absolutely didn't know. The first time I saw it, I absolutely
I'd not necessarily realised it. But it is, I mean, I did like it much more this time
around. Yeah, same.
And I appreciated the, like I said, the themes of like motherhood and, that idea about maternal and not even just maternal love, but like the intimacy between women and the sort of political aspects of it. So I think there is a lot to like there. I just think that it's too long.
Yeah, no, that's true. Can't really defend it. But if like me, you watch it over 5 seasons, it's not a problem, really.
Just watch it for half an hour at a time, and you'll be fine.
Well,
for folklore corner this week, I've not gone down the folklore route because I thought that was quite difficult to do for this. So instead, what I thought we'd pick up the threads that we've sort of been setting out so far, thinking about the role of like witchcraft in politics.
Oh, excellent.
And I think, firstly, what I want to say is that it's important for us to acknowledge that witchcraft has always been political, at least as long as there's been discourse around it, as long as it's been, But what's interesting, I think, is to look at it from two sides. So first, looking at how the witch as a figure has been used as a political tool for oppression, which we still see today, and that's going to become much more obvious in our discussions of some of the other films on this series. But I think we touched on it when we talked about The Witch last time, that, the social hysteria that we see in Salem is there were a lot of political factors that played a really significant role in those accusations. And so we see that accusations of witchcraft then became like a tool for social control. And this is a time when like secularization was on the rise. So this was the church frantically trying to keep a stronghold, much like the film we talked about last time, The Omen, first chapter, which if people have not seen it, run, don't walk.
Brandon.
But this idea that, that people were turning away from religion, and the way that they were going to try and drag them back were this idea that witches were afoot and could cause great harm.
This is your only salvation sort of thing.
Yeah, and I know we touched on it a little bit in the Witches episode with Emily. But I just wanted us to have a bit more time to talk about it, I suppose. This, the idea that being accused of being a witch were a tool for social control. I don't know. What are your thoughts on that, Clelia?
Yeah, no, I mean it was very. No, we've touched upon it in the episode with Emily, and also and also when we talked about the witch. But this idea, even the false stories that are still propagated about like why were women accused of being witches, not necessarily false, but in kind of like that myth of midwives, and that's not I'm not saying it's not obviously it never happened, but it's like a lot less consequential that that we are led to believe in the first place, and it's more to do with social status more than anything else. So yeah.
I suppose what's interesting for me, and I'm still, as you can tell by this very coherent rambling I'm doing, that I'm still formulating my own thoughts on it. But I think it's interesting that, obviously it's tied to misogyny, and we talked about that in the Witch episode. It's very much rooted in these women are a problem for us, either economically because they can't contribute as much, or in terms of men's desire for these women, and we're good Christian men, so rather than it being our fault for being like horny dickbags, it's their fault, they must be bewitching my penis. But I think because we see such, the witch trials went on for centuries, and globally, there were instances of witch trials, and we still see it today, that witchcraft accusations ruin people's lives. And I don't know really what my thoughts are on it, I suppose, beyond that. I think it's interesting that something that is so rooted in, or at least initially we could say is rooted in being, environmentally friendly, essentially, in living, living on the land and sort of, not really bothering anybody.
It's this real hatred and like wanting to control people as much as possible, right? It's almost like people are, happily living their lives, and that's just that doesn't work for the society, for the system.
And also, I mean, it did weaken this like hysteria. It did weaken political power that people in Salem and in other places held during trials, because afterwards, as this secularization was increased, more people were like, "You believe in witches," which basically is about what, like, a witch is coming in your bedroom at night. So it did weaken their power over time. But that isn't a simplification of it. But it's just interesting, I think, about we think today about our fear and accusation are tools for political systems to remain in power, and to keep that control. And it's so from that, I think what's interesting is to think about how there has been this real shift towards a willing acceptance of that label. And we see that the reclaiming of the witch as a political figure in feminist politics, and really in 1970s. And this is what Emily were talking about when we see this. It's very ahistorical, this reinterpretation of these women as, maternal, midwives, healers. And that's not to say that they weren't, that there weren't women. No,
but that's not the complete
it's
picture.
not that there weren't women who had that knowledge about how to, heal things with plants and things. And I do think the ties to the rise in medicine and men in medicine is a part of this. As I mentioned in the Witches episode. But it's interesting that we see in 1970s this like harking back to these like, halcyon days of frolicking in fields, and before industrialization and capitalism came and ruined everything for everybody.
Yes, that's right.
And that's interesting as well, I think, to think about reclaiming that figure when actually we know that most women who were killed in witch trials were just poor and old and ostracized.
So in a way, reclaiming the figure of the witch is it's anti. Well, I mean, we know it is anti-establishment. It's anti-capitalism, basically, which is why it's so ironic to see capitalism filling their money, filling their pockets with with money by using the figure of the witch as as an excuse to sell T-shirts and mugs and all this. I mean, all the stuff that we've talked about past. There's always putting their grubby hands on it, but at the heart of it really is a desire to for people to live and think independently, right? So
absolutely. And what's interesting, I think, as well, is that alongside this, like, capitalism and industrialization, that like Judeo-Christian beliefs deepen that divide between spirit and matter. And so we see that women have always been like rooted in this bodily space, that women are matter, and that ties to nature and evil and the devil. And so, but this male god, Sky Daddy, is uncontaminated by like menstruation and birth and decay. So he's the spirit. So we should all be aspiring to the spirit, and women are just the grubby matter that we stomp on. But in that like postmodern context, I think that's really interesting. And when we think about this reclamation in 70s, and I'm not going to get too deep into post-modernity, but like witchcraft and this community, the idea of the coven, of community, of women coming together, we really see how that is in direct opposition to this neoliberalism, this rise in neoliberalism, and this move away from the village to the isolated individual.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Which is, what's, illustrated quite well in, in the 2018, iteration of Suspiria's idea of, that women commune, this, them all looking after each other and offering a sustainable way of living, which then poses a threat to the world around.
Absolutely. And I think that's one of my problems with the representation of them in the film is that
Yes.
you know, the idea that, and I've seen some people write about this, that women together with power can only do evil things.
Yes.
That there can only be either a power struggle or evil outcomes if women are allowed to be powerful together. And I do think it replicates some of them narratives.
Yeah, that's true. In a way, it's like there's a lot of similarities between the 2018 Suspiria and The Craft as well.
Yeah.
It's like, you know, or if women have too much power, then like they get away with themselves, and like, you know, and they try to just, you know, harbor it for themselves rather than for the collective. Yeah,
and that's it, isn't it? And I think one of the interesting things about that, the reclaiming of the witch, is that it is a very rebellious thing, which, you know, we've already said, but part of it stems on like the body and a focus on the body and like embodied practice in ritual. And I think that's, you know, we see that in Suspiria, that it's very much about power moving through the body, and you know, to love and celebrate your body is a radical act still for women in a society that just encourages us to hate ourselves. And part of the dangers of, you know, capitalism's sort of grasping at witchcraft as a commodity is that it's going to be easy enough to be like, oh, here's a spell for slimmer thighs. Here's a magic scrub for your spots. Like it's so easy to see how that shift could take place. But you know, I think skeptical people argue that like magic and mysticism, this idea that it's like a flight from reality that's become unbearable, whereas other people would say that it's about taking your power back and like owning your destiny, and, you know, using the witch and practice, ritualized practice, is a way of reclaiming your power. And I don't think there's a right or wrong answer to that. It's what you believe in it, you know.
Yes.
And we do see in that, what I think's interesting is to think about the classic figure of the witch, is how she's taking these really mundane aspects of daily life, like a broom and a cauldron, and she makes them powerful.
Yes.
You know, she gives these everyday objects power. And we have, you know, emphasised that, I think, in this series, like that, you know, those that are accused were poor and they were disenfranchised. And instead now what we see is that the idea of the witch really subverts them like social norms and becomes this symbol of defiance and like living up margins in this liminal space up margins of society, which is exciting. I just want
It is exciting.
You know,
I love that. I love the way that you've described it as well, and it's very it's very empowering, that idea of like, oh well, we'll take the tools that you have, you know, bundled us with, you know, that you said, the broom, the, you know, all that, you know, all those domestic objects, and then, you know, and then infuse them with, you know, with that magic, and with that, you know, transform them in powerful and empowering elements, you know.
Well, that's it, isn't it? It's like taking that the reality of like domesticity and going, well, fuck you, I'm gonna, you know, I'm gonna enchant it. And it's and we do see that, you know, in recent years, like the intersection between witchcraft and activism, that I think is really exciting when it's done in an empowering way. You know, things like Hex the Patriarchy, and then in wake of Me Too, you know, I don't think it's hard to grasp why in wake of things like Me Too and political systems that we've had to live in for eternity. I think it makes sense that, you know, the symbol, like the ritual and the idea of you know, where sexual violence continues and perpetrators go unpunished, and I'm getting very depressing now at this point, but, you know, but with this world that we live in, I don't think it's any wonder that women are still seeking this, like, secret power of the witch, what the witch represents. But I think what is interesting is this shift from private to public spaces. So, you know, historically people would have maybe engaged in these rituals and practice, but wouldn't necessarily be open about it. But then, you know, we saw, like, public events to hex Trump. You know, like, and Brett Kavanaugh, and we've seen how this intersection between witchcraft and activism has become a very public part of public discourse, which draws attention to the activism, but then draws attention to witchcraft in a way that I think mainstream media just focuses on, like the symbolism of all these women are witches.
Yeah. Just doesn't grasp at all.
Yeah, which I mean, it's a shame, but that's what media does. But I suppose, does it matter? Do you think if it is magic or if it is fantasy?
No, I don't think it does at all. I think it's it's beyond the importance is so beyond that really, that it's or it's the individual or it's each individual is able to imbue those things then with that with magic. So actually
I read a really good, I'll link it in show notes as well, I read a really good blog post about this from Miranda Corcoran, and it's called Hex the Patriarchy. And what Miranda's talking about in that is that fantasy, that rather than it being an escape from reality, can instead be a way to express our voice and our rage and anger in a way that can't be done in reality. And so fantasy is not necessarily that you refuse to accept reality. Instead, it can be a way that you can express yourself in a reality that don't allow that, which I just think is so powerful.
It is so powerful, the same way that, and we talk about it all the time, but horror does exactly the same thing. It's a space where we're able to play out those fantasy and like to get the justice that we deserve, and to it's like it's not escaping reality, so being able to process and to process these things and make them right.
Well, that's what art does, isn't it? That's what we can do through art and creation of fantasy and things. And I think, another really good article from Kevin Whitenier, I think I'm pronouncing that, Kevin Whitenier Jr., called Protect Your Magic. And in that, Kevin's talking about activism and witchcraft, and saying that, the commodification of witchcraft is disrupting potential for these like esoteric practices to be radical practices in forms of activism, and instead they're being, and I'm going to be depressing again, like subsumed by capitalism. And we see that like fast fashion's gobbling up witchcraft, and children are mining for crystals, and Forever 21's selling merch, and Amazon sell tarot cards, and it's become big business.
It has, I think, unfortunately, like they'll never be. I can't imagine we'll ever be able to completely disassociate from this. But then I think the audience that is concerned by this aspect of it is, I don't know, like you can see it two ways. Kind of either that can be a gateway to better things, or this is a type of audience that is never going to concern themselves with the bigger meaning of things. So
I think that is a really valid point. And I think especially after pandemic, that's when we see this big rise in witch talk, and that people turn to witchcraft as a means of coping with this uncertainty. And it can be a really powerful tool if you feel out of control, to feel like the ritual and the practice can give you some sense of control in a world that is frightening and dangerous, and and like as you've said, it's, I suppose, we'll never get away from Amazon selling tarot cards, and but again, that's the being ethical about where you spend your money, isn't it? So everybody listening, don't buy your tarot cards from Amazon. But I just thought it were a really interesting area, and I'd love to hear what our listeners think about it, to be honest, the witch as a political figure, because it's become, there's been such a transition between perceptions of the witch. First as this, really abject, isolated figure who, were potentially going to be murdered for not fitting in, and then this reclamation in 70s, but that being grounded really in this like imagined history that's not really necessarily, well, it's not representative of everyone's experience. And now we're seeing its links to activism that I think are really exciting and empowering and interesting, but in tandem with this.
Yes, in tandem with the capitalist.
This big commodification of it. So, I would be interested to know what people think about it. But yes, well, on that note, I suppose we should think about...
That was so interesting,
recommendations. So what have you got, Clelia? What recommendations do you have?
Okay, I've got a few, but I mean we've pretty much talked about them as we were discussing. So the first one is Possession, as we said that the 2018 version is very like would be I'm not sure if that would be a good double bill, to be honest, but maybe like on separate days you can watch both of them.
One of my favorite films of all time, Possession.
Yeah, absolutely. You know what I read? Interestingly enough, I was on social media just before we were recording this episode, and someone I went to university with said that they'd watched it. They'd finally seen Possession for the first time, and they absolutely hated it. And I was like, okay, I'll get back to this. Like, I need to prepare my rant about it. But anyway, hard disagree. Other suggestions would be, well, if you want to watch the entire Three Mothers trilogy, it's out there. It's available. So Suspiria, obviously, Inferno from 1980, and Mother of Tears from 2007. And also, I found out that Dario Argento actually said he hasn't ruled out making a fourth film to add to the collection. Talking more about the Three Mothers mythology. So, you never know. Then other films, but I mean, obviously, Dario Argento has got such an extensive body of work. We've got a complicated relationship with Dario Argento. I think most people do. Most women do anyway, at least. But like, some that I absolutely love and that I would recommend. Deep Red from 1975, one of my absolute favorites. The Bird with the Crystal Plumage, which was his first film in 1970, and there's actually a clever little nod to this film in Suspiria when she goes into the room where Mother Marcos is. There is a fantastic sculpture of a bird.
Yes,
it's kind of like a direct reference to
I did notice that. Yeah.
Then Four Flies on Grey Velvet from 1971 is my absolute favorite, and Tenebrae from 1982. So yeah, those are my recommendations. What about you?
So I would say one that I need to rewatch actually, and I've only seen it I think once before, but Lords of Salem. I would recommend. Yes. And I know people sometimes shit on
and they're remaking
this.
Like,
are they remaking it? I
think they are. I might be wrong, but
I know people shit on Rob Zombie, but I like a lot of Rob Zombie's films, and I really liked Lords of Salem. I think it's a big departure from like House of a Thousand Corpses and stuff, and it's much more. It's really just weird and cool, and I really enjoyed it. And I would also say, I think we get into a point now where I feel like we're like the snake eating its own tail, because everything that I want to recommend is like stuff we're already covering on.
Yeah. I know, which is the difficult bit where it's kind of like, don't recommend stuff that we're already covering.
Yeah, but I think in terms of things just being like strange and you don't really know what's going on, something like Antichrist. Which is very strange. You can never really know what's going on. Not necessarily about witchcraft, but there's something weird happening. I did watch Hagazusa.
Don't know that one.
I didn't like it.
Okay. Kind of a not recommendation here.
I didn't like it, but loads of people rave about it, and I
don't know what that is. I don't think I've even heard of it. It's
like a folk horror, witch sort of folk horror. Which obviously you can see why I would have watched it, and I did watch it, and I didn't enjoy it, but a lot of people do. So don't just take my word for it, I guess. And yeah, I think that's only things I can really think of that are ones that I like really like without going back over what we've already covered already. Obviously, if you want to see something that's absolutely insane, you could watch Season of the Witch with Nicolas Cage. Just for the wigs. Apart from for the wigs, except for Ron Perlman, who obviously said, "Fuck you, I'm not wearing a wig," so he's got a buzz cut in like 16th century France or whatever they are. So
don't go for the historically accurate.
We don't care. Nobody cares about that. And also, I think Season of the Witch. I don't know if we've mentioned that one before. That's pretty good. So yeah, there are many good witch films, but I'm trying not to recommend all the good witch films that we're going to be covering. So
exactly. Yeah. Come back next time for more.
Come back next time for more good witch films. Yeah.
Excellent. Well, thanks for listening to Monsters Flesh. Please join us next time for more discussion about witches. In the meantime, you can find out more about us via our website, monstrousflesh.co.uk, where you can access our research for each episode, buy our superb merch, and see our upcoming events. We'd love to hear from you, either via our email or social media channels. And also, please rate and review wherever you listen to podcasts. It really, really does help us. Please, drop us a like, a little comment. We love it. And help
Speak
us
to us.
Speak to us. Exactly. Communicate with any channel that you like. Telepathy. It's up to you. But help us spread our spooky word by telling your friends about Monstrous Flesh. And until next time, creep it weird, everyone.